if you're into mountain biking and buying the stuff that comes along with that, you've probably seen me on the internet trying to sell you that stuff. Well, let me come back to that. A few nights after recording this podcast with my sister Gavi, who you'll meet here shortly, I had the realization that I've basically dedicated my whole life to mountain bikes in some form or another, which was kind of a scary thought at the time. I did keep thinking about it, though, because it kind of freaked me out. Like, what have I done? I'm 32 years old, and I just do bikes. More than that, but in a lot of ways, you could sum it up like that. And then I actually realized that it's actually a pretty powerful realization. You know, growing up, I always wished I was one of these people that seemed to have known their calling from day one. I had never felt like that was me. But hey, who knew? Turns out maybe I have had a calling all along. Anyways, I realized that throughout this life, I've met a lot of really cool people through mountain biking. And I decided I wanted to try and share that, which is kind of how this all came about. That's basically the premise of this whole podcast, is to get to know some of these people better that maybe I've become acquainted with, but don't know that well. And to be able to share that with you, with other people that might be interested as well. And if you like it, maybe to meet some more people through this whole experience. So back to what I was saying, stuff. You could be forgiven for calling me a bike nerd, especially if you just watch all the videos that I have put online through work with the Bike Shop Fanatic. But in actuality, for me, it's not about the stuff at all. It's about the people that make mountain biking so cool. And, you know, that's kind of the whole idea behind all this. So I'm actually starting with my sister, Gavi. I thought she'd be a neat person to start with because she's new to this area, to Bellingham, where I live. She's also new to mountain biking. So I thought it might lend a pretty cool outside perspective and force me and force us to take a step back and look at it from that outsider's perspective. I also thought it would be a good opportunity for you to get to know me a little bit, since I'll be the constant throughout these episodes. And hey, if you don't like me, this will be a good place to stop watching. But I do hope you like me despite my raspy ass voice. Anyways, this is MTB in review. Let's get it going. Well, here we are on episode 1 of the podcast that I'm starting with help from you and my brother, who did all the artwork that you'll see online. And I know I've been talking about this for quite a while now. So why don't you, Gavi, tell me what this podcast is about, if you don't mind.
Let's hope I don't mess it up.
I want to hear your interpretation of what it's about. So,
okay.
Yeah, whatever you think.
MTB in review. We're talking about mountain biking in Bellingham and getting people's different perspectives on where they've come into mountain biking and how they feel about it and how it's grown and changed.
Yeah, so that's right. So not even in Bellingham specifically, although obviously we live here. And, you know, it's a hot spot for mountain biking, as you've come to find out since you've been here, just under a year. It'll be a year in June. Moved here 2021 for what was going to be, a couple months?
2 months.
2 months you had been living in DC. Tell me about that whole, what happened there?
Well, so pre-COVID, I was in between jobs. I was previously living in Memphis, Tennessee, and then I moved home to live with our parents in Bethesda, Maryland, which is just outside of DC. So COVID hit, and I said, what the hey, I'll continue living here as I'm job searching and, not doing anything. So I was living with our parents.
You'd been in where in Mexico prior to that?
Well, I'd been in Memphis, and then I went to Mexico for 8 months to the Pacific coast of Mexico in a small city called Bucerías near Puerto Vallarta. After Mexico, I went back to Memphis for 3 months, then went to DC. Anywho, so during COVID, September 2020, I got a job based out of Washington, DC, and it was fully remote. So after, I think almost a year more of, maybe like 8 months more of living with my parents, I said, well, I'm working remotely.
Heck it. Get the heck out of here.
Get the heck out of here. Can't live with my parents anymore. They are great roommates, though.
You did always call them your roommates on the phone when we'd be having
my boss at the time. He was like, you should stop calling them your parents. You should start calling them your roommates.
Okay. Well, I thought you were going to flip it. I thought he was going to tell you to stop calling them your
No, because I kept telling him how I kept hanging out with my parents and their friends. And he was like, yeah, maybe you should start calling them roommates.
That's what they were.
Anywho, so I spent 3 months living in New Orleans, where I have a bunch of friends, and I was just working remotely. And then last summer, 2021, came out to visit you and Jamie and Nora Juniper Dog. And I was anticipating it to only be a few months, and then I pretty quickly convinced my boss to let me be permanently remote, and here I am.
Here you are. Now, that was obviously a pretty big change. You'd been in Memphis for 6 years, then in Mexico for 8 months, then in DC for 10 months. Was it over a year?
Maybe a year, yeah.
And playing Ultimate Frisbee all the while. That's kind of your gig. You're a pretty competitive Ultimate player. In fact, of the three of us siblings, myself, our middle brother, Nick, I'm the oldest, and then you, I think it's kind of fun. We're all pretty involved in our respective sports, but I dare say that you're probably the most competitive of the bunch. Like, definitely in terms of attending competitions and competitive play, for sure, without a doubt. But even like in terms of, like Nick is a very, very strong boulderer, and it's kind of biased because there's so many talented mountain bikers in Bellingham, but I've been mountain biking for a long time. And I'm pretty passionate about it, but I would say you're more passionate about your sport than probably I am about mountain biking. And Nick might be a toss-up. He's pretty obsessed with climbing, but like, you just got back from a tournament in Austin.
And one in Walla Walla.
And one in Walla Walla the weekend after. And then you just told me you're flying to Colombia for another Ultimate Frisbee tournament. Anyways, I think that's pretty cool. And you actually plugged into the Ultimate community here really, really quickly. I was like, you'd been here actually, you showed up and you already had plans to go play Ultimate with people.
Yeah.
Through like a Facebook group. Yeah. So that was fun. Where was I? Oh yeah, so you showed up, and the week after, when did we go to that silver NA North American Enduro Cup?
That was like 1 week after I arrived.
After your arrival, and we went to watch friends of mine who are now friends of yours go race. I wasn't racing, but we did take bikes, and you went mountain biking for your first time, resort riding, right?
Yep.
What'd you think of that?
It was super fun. It was a very intimidating environment to do my first mountain bike ride in, but I remember it was pretty funny because like my first weekend here, I got here on a Friday. On Saturday morning, we went into town, and you made me buy mountain biking shoes, grabbed me a broken helmet, still functioning. Visor is broken.
Just the visor. It was fully safe.
fully safe, all duct taped up. So I was like, okay, well, I'm in it. I guess I'm going mountain biking, or at least I'll try it. And then following weekend in Silver, we went resort riding, and yeah, I mean, we were doing the green runs, but I remember when we got to like the top of the trail, I was just like, oh my God, this looks steep. And you're like, okay, here we go. Just elbows up, elbows up, elbows out.
Eyes ahead.
Yeah, eyes up.
One finger on each brake.
So, you know, I figured there was no sort of like, I was either going to go down or I wasn't. And I did it. And thankfully that day I didn't crash at all. But yeah, no, it was super fun. The hardest part, I think, was like getting your bike onto the lifts. That was nerve wracking.
Yeah, I mean, it's like skiing in that.
Like skiing, everyone's watching.
Maybe harder than skiing. I don't know. As far as like getting on the lift, on and off the lift.
Yeah, no, it was manageable.
Yeah. Well, and then so this was actually not your first exposure to like racing. We were there primarily to watch people race, friends of ours race, but you had been exposed to like mountain biking in a competition setting once before. Tell me about that real quick.
So that was when I was living in Mexico. I'd been there for like maybe 3 months or so. And then Daniel, you called and you were like, hey.
This was back in 2019, I think.
It was fall 2018, I think.
Okay, well, that shows what I mean.
And so, yeah, you said a bunch of your friends from like Colorado, from Fort Collins, were going to this urban downhill race in Guanajuato, Mexico.
Will Overbaugh, shout out to Road 34, Fort Collins.
Anyway.
Always making fun things happen.
Always a good time. So I said, okay, yeah, I'll fly, meet you in Mexico City, rent a car, drive up to Guanajuato with you and like, I don't know, 6 of your friends who flew out for this race.
No, actually it was I think just 2 or 3 that flew out, but then Will had friends.
Oh yeah, who came and met us.
Who, you know, live in Mexico, people that he had met on one of his, you know, crazy harebrained road trips, just some folks from central Mexico that ended up putting up and becoming good friends, and they came out to visit. And yeah, so we went to spectate an urban downhill race. Actually, my first urban downhill race, which I was going to race, but then I had my bike all packed up in a bike bag. And then the night before I flew out, Will got in touch and he's like, hey, so the Mexico City airport this time of year near Christmas, they don't take oversized luggage. So you got to take your bike apart completely and put it in some duffel bags. And I was like, fuck that. I'm just going to go hang with Gavi and I'm not bringing my bike and I'll just go heckle you, which ended up being a good call. I had a lot of fun with you. And that was your first experience, real like eye-opening experience as to like what mountain biking, and it technically is urban downhill. So it's really not at all what mountain biking is, but the competition side and the community side, I remember you being pretty sort of wowed at how into it everybody was and like, you know, how much fun people were having, I think. Is that accurate?
It was a big party scene. It was cool because like everybody, I mean, when we were there, they were like still building the route and like, you know, throwing the bags of hay against like the brick walls and
so people didn't crash. Sharp brick walls.
And like Will and everyone were like, you know, walking the course every day and like doing practice runs. Yeah. So and it was cool also to see like, because people in the local community, like kids and adults, all were like racing too. So it was cool to see like this mixture of like the international scene and the local scene for mountain biking.
Yeah. Yeah. Which it's pretty cool because mountain biking is going off in a really big way in Central and South America. So, which I'd known about for a long time. Like one of my coworkers, Branham, a fanatic, grew up in Mexico and like it was introduced to it. He'll talk your ear off about it. But no, it was cool to see that and cool to see how stoked on it everyone was. Now, so that was, you've told me this, your sort of first like real exposure to mountain biking. And we'll eventually get back to like right now, but I remember when I discovered mountain biking in high school, it was to bring it back to Ultimate Frisbee. It was the captains of this, you know, Ultimate Frisbee club were some 3 years older than me. I thought they were cool as shit. I'd see them doing wheelies up our street every single day. And I, played in this like very recreational ultimate after school club. And I was like, those guys are cool. I knew that they got into rock climbing, which I didn't do at that time. I saw them on their bikes and I was like, I basically was like, I want to be like them. And through one of them, kind of who like sort of took me under his wing, essentially. Actually, it wasn't even, well, anyways, bought a hardtail very quickly, like got it, like realized I loved mountain biking without having really done it. I think this friend took me to one downhill race and I was hooked. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then got my first job ever, which was at a bike shop. And that was I was like, I really didn't do much mountain biking because access in Maryland was pretty poor, but at least where we were for a kid without, a car. But I knew bikes were going to be like a big part of my life. But even then, I remember being like, whoa, what is this sport? Like, I didn't know downhill racing was a thing. I didn't know people like did this. I'd ridden bicycles my whole life. But I'm wondering kind of what your perception of what mountain biking even was until like prior to that race at Guanajuato. Like, did you have any notion of really like what mountain biking was, or like how into it people are and stuff like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was basically like completely removed. Like, it was never something that I had thought about. The only times I was like, oh, mountain biking is a thing and people do it, or when you would send like crazy photos of you going down like rock rolls or something. I figured it was, one of those extreme sports that like very niche communities are into, and never really put much thought into it.
Well, and so that's actually a pretty fair assessment up until, the last 5-10 years. That's actually kind of what it has been. And you've now been transported into, like, in a lot of ways is very close to the birthplace of that type of riding specifically, not mountain biking as a whole, but, the type of riding that you're now getting exposed to, and like, gravity oriented riding started really in Vancouver, and on the North Shore of Vancouver, which is, you actually have been here during the pandemic, so we really haven't gone up to Canada at all. But you're basically at the birthplace of mountain biking, or gravity mountain biking. And that's what I want to talk to you about next, because we talked about your first experience actually riding a mountain bike at Silver. But then I had 2 mountain bikes at the time. So, I was loaning you one with some frequency, and we'd get out on weekends here and there, and Jamie and I and other friends would go out riding with you. But yeah, tell me about like I basically like thrust you into being a mountain biker. We already talked about you getting like your shoes and your helmet and stuff the week of, but pretty soon after, like, you were mountain biking semi-regularly. I'd say once a week or maybe more.
So at first it was definitely like you and Jamie were like, okay, we're going biking right now. Like, come on, you got it. We're going. I definitely had to be sort of convinced to go out at first. I remember, I think there was one weekend that like maybe I'd gone biking with you and or Jamie on a Friday, and then I decided to go up to Galbraith by myself on a Sunday and do like bobs. Anyway, so I went by myself, and I feel like immediately after that, you said, all right, you gotta get a mountain bike now. Like, she's in it. She went by herself. Yeah, I guess I was going to say also, like, some of I think maybe one of the first times I was out biking at Galbraith, we were like biking down the hill, down Birch, and there were these like 3 guys doing like wheelies or whatever they're called when you're still I don't know.
A manual.
Oh, they're doing manuals.
Yeah.
I know the lingo. Anyway, and it was just like, there's like cars going by and these guys are doing manuals down this big hill. And I remember I was like, this is an alternate reality, like alternate universe. But since that point, I've now like gone biking a whole bunch with a lot of my Frisbee friends. So there's a lot of crossover. And I think it's, being friends with you and Jamie and I think you're friends with people who are like, mountain biking is their sport, and that's like what they're committed to, and that's what they are working on improving all the time. But going biking with my Frisbee friends, I'm like, oh, it's also a more casual thing that people are into and can be into. So it's just cool to see the different sort of
takes on it.
Yeah.
So you are obviously this at this point. I don't know to what extent you were aware of it when you came out to visit initially, but you're in sort of like what is the Mecca of mountain biking in the US. I say, pretty confidently. I think that's a very arguable point. Again, the proximity to the North Shore of Vancouver is I think a big part of that. It's basically all the people who were attracted to that sort of riding, to Whistler in particular. This is as far as you can get in the US, as close as you can get in the US to that sort of riding. And it sort of spurred its own like pretty strong riding scene. Like the access to logging land around here has allowed people to create user-built trails, is what the PC term for illegal trails. And it just sort of like spawned, basically they took over back in, whatever the 80s and 90s, started taking over all the moto trails. Not all of them, there's still plenty of moto trails, but sort of usurping moto trails and putting wooden stunts on them. You see the remnants around Galbraith and stuff. And so you're now in this Mecca of mountain biking, which, I've lived in a few places, obviously Maryland, but then Fort Collins, Colorado is often seen as like a hot spot for mountain biking. And it was, but it's like a very different scene there. Like people are not building trails on public land, on DNR land. And so access to trails and what the trails look like is very, very different than it looks like here. I'm kind of curious. Yeah. Like, if you have any thoughts on that, and like, I feel like frequently you've been here, close to a year now. How frequently are you riding the same trail that you rode last time? Like, probably not that frequently, I would guess. I guess Bob's, you probably hit Bob's quite a bit because that's an easy one. But yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean the access to the trails is something I still try and like wrap my mind around, because I still don't understand fully the dynamic of like, oh, like people can just build trails on these lands. So it's an interesting, I mean, it's just, I feel like it's totally different from other spots, that there is so much opportunity to be able to like build more trail on public land. Even at Galbraith, like I am still learning my way around because there's just so many different trails, and I feel like you're just like chancing upon something new every time you go.
I'll add that doesn't end, by the way. I still, with some regularity, find a new trail that I haven't ridden on Galbraith that's been there the whole time. I just never thought to ride. You get stuck in your little routines. Mm-hmm. And anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jamie and I think one of the more recent rides we did, we like got lost on this trail that was like, popped out onto a road, and then we had to like climb back up because it was still in process.
Brand new trail, yeah.
Yeah, it was brand new. And I was like, I guess we're lost on Galbraith now.
We're like next to a neighborhood.
Yeah, we were behind people's houses.
Yeah.
No, Jamie had us fully covered.
Sweet. Yeah, she's good like that. Well, and so you mentioned riding with Jamie. You mentioned riding with Ultimate Frisbee friends, and that's a co-ed group. But that's actually another point I wanted to ask you about is mountain biking is a very new sport, as I've mentioned a couple times, and it has been predominantly a guy's sport. Like, it's something that's attracted guys for whatever reason, and now we're making like big headway as the popularity of the sport has grown, particularly since the pandemic started, but even before that, it was growing by leaps and bounds every year. More and more women and more young women and girls are getting involved in the sport, which is pretty cool. Like you see, like Hannah, you've gotten to know, Hannah Bergman is sort of like this sort of almost second generation of professional free ride athletes. And again, free ride being gravity oriented, kind of trick jump oriented, mountain biking, and is now going to the third year of Red Bull Formation, which is something another local woman, Katie Holden, had the idea to get going. It's like a sort of a jam based, like non-competition based free ride event in Utah, where they invite women who have sort of shown that they're capable of riding this sort of stuff. First year was a lot of downhill race athletes. Some of them were like, this is not what I like to do. I want to go fast down a trail. There's no trail here. And you pretty much have to go as slow as you possibly can, or else you'll fall off the cliff. But that, this year, even since last year, which was the second year, it got canceled in 2020 because of the pandemic. I think 2019 was the first year. So like massive leaps in the women that were involved in that, in what they were able to tackle and what they were able to do. And then the cool thing about that event is that they're also like mentoring other women that are, maybe haven't had the access to that type of terrain that allows them to like go really big. But they're like mentoring them in terms of like digging and stuff like that. So there's a lot of progression being made in terms of bringing women and girls into the sport. But I'm wondering, from your perspective as a new mountain biker, like, does it seem like a bro show? I don't know. That's not, I think I just made that up. But like, does it seem like, does it like, is it a turn off like that there's just like guys and like, pit viper goggles and stuff like that? Or you've mentioned your ultimate friends. Has it felt like a pretty welcoming scene? I'm curious.
Yeah, no, I think it has felt like a pretty welcoming scene. And I think part of that is because you and Jamie were just like, roping me along to do everything. Mm-hmm. Also, Jamie has a pretty good group of gal friends who are like all awesome bikers and are all super friendly and super warm and welcoming, and encouraging. So like every time I've gone biking a few times with Jamie's group of female friends. And I'm remembering like one ride in particular. I think we were on Chuckanut with Kate. And I mean, we would stop at like parts that looked trickier, that like were super steep, and I wasn't sure about them. And Kate,
find your line.
Help me find my way down, and, like led me into a few, parts. And it was just like super encouraging and motivating. So that's been really cool. I think also part of it is like I've played mixed ultimate, which is, open to all genders. Mm-hmm. So I feel more comfortable, I think, like doing a sport where perhaps previously it was more, male oriented or male dominated. And I do, see women biking around all the time, and like groups of women and, girls and their parents biking around. So I feel like maybe it's different elsewhere, but I feel like here it's I've not felt
community.
I've not felt cut off. Yeah, and I feel like there are a lot of opportunities for kids and like boys and girls to get involved. I'm thinking of that event that we went to at Blue Steel on Galbraith.
Hannah's hang time.
The hang time event. Mm-hmm. And I just remember there were like 4-year-old or like 6-year-old little girls, pushing the riders' bikes up the hill.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was super cool. Like, totally nonchalant. They're just like, I'm going to be here next year,
Like, so, I'm going to be hitting 40-foot jumps next year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sick. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I think there's a number of women like Hannah, for example, like Katie Holden and a number of others that, you know, more than I can run through right now, but there's a lot of them that are doing really big things to make that change come about, which is awesome. I'm really stoked to see that. I've been really happy to see that.
I was also going to say, so like Hannah's totally paving the way for, you know, making it a more inclusive sport. Ashley Jambor
yeah,
also leads these, you know, like Mountain Women of Bellingham get-togethers for, you know, women to meet each other, not necessarily like, you know, revolve around mountain biking, but, you know, I've made friends there who are new to mountain biking and gone biking with them. And I feel like there are, you know, other avenues where people are trying to like open it up to newcomers.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Making sure I turned the mic on, which everything I'd seen made me positive that it was on. I was like, yeah, it's on. I can see that it's on. But first podcast nerves. I just wanted to make sure that your mic was on. Like the red light. Needed to see it. Yeah, no, Ashley with Cosmic Dirt is crushing it. She's lived here. She and Doug lived here for a very long time. Doug's from near Seattle, and I don't remember where Ashley's from, but they were in Bellingham for ages and like really involved with the scene. Her in particular, you know, was always out shuttling and stuff like that. Has been riding for a long time, but since she started Cosmic Dirt, she got this wild hair to start this clothing company, Cosmic Dirt, that makes like you know, body. What's the phrase, like body positive clothing, like clothing for everybody. I think a lot of people have trouble finding bike attire that fits well, which I think might extend beyond just like non-average shape people. Like I can't find shorts that fit me well. Pretty much everybody I know hates biking attire. I think it's a new enough like thing that the companies just haven't figured it out very well yet. Maybe we need to get like Levi's to get involved. That's all they're different. I just bought new jeans, so I need some 514 bike pants or something. But yeah, Ashley's been crushing it. She has a lot of soft goods out right now, but they're working on a full tech line. So like all the biking kit, and pretty excited to see that. One thing that I've been wondering is on the YouTube videos that I do at work for Fanatic, pretty much every single video, someone complains about how raspy my voice gets, which just happens when I talk for like an extended, usually I'm on like the second take of the video. So I've been talking for a bit and my voice just goes to shit. And I'm like, well, we'll see how that goes in a podcast where that's all they get is my voice. So it's kind of like a fuck you to all the people that, you know, like my voice. Well, now all you get is my voice.
Maybe it'll be a pivotal moment for those people. They'll say,
you know,
I embrace this.
The scratch, the graveliness, it's okay.
Gravelly voice, Dan.
Well, Gav, I guess one of the last things I wanted you as the first guest because I was curious about your perspective as a new mountain biker, as a new person in Bellingham, and as a woman to this historically male-dominated sport. But another reason is because I think, you know, despite this is an interview show, I'd like to talk to people that I find interesting, that I think, you know, I want to hear their involvement in essentially the history of mountain biking. And I think there's a lot of those people here in Bellingham, and I'm sure as you know, we continue to do these, there will be people outside of Bellingham as well. But the last reason I sort of wanted you to be the first episode is because we're related and we lived here, my roommate also and friend. So, and I figured it would, I thought it would give the listeners, maybe like a bit more perspective on who the host is, who I am. So on that note, I'm wondering if you have any like questions for me about this, about mountain biking, about how I see mountain biking and like, what it is to me, or anything like that, about why I'm doing this podcast or anything else.
Yeah, I do have a question for you. I also wanted to say earlier, it was cool to hear how you became interested in mountain biking, because I didn't know that you just like saw some cool older kids and,
It was actually ultimate frisbee, which is your sport that triggered
playing
it
ultimate, which is hilarious because I got into ultimate because you and your friends, when you joined that club, organized some like practices or a club at my middle school at the time. And so that's how I like really started learning how to play. I guess our father used to play. So I knew how to throw, but.
And the three of us actually would like toss the disc out on the front of the street.
We would throw the disc. Yeah. Oh, and I remember you would always throw the disc so hard and I'd be like throwing it too hard.
This is why you're so good at ultimate now.
But what I was going to say is that, so like you essentially introduced me to the sport of ultimate. And then I remember you and your frisbee friends and then mountain biking friends would invite me when I was still in middle school to play ultimate, like in the high school parking lot at night. And I thought I was like the coolest person ever because my cool older brother invited me to go play ultimate with his cool friends. And so then I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to play ultimate for a long time.
Sweet.
So it's funny that that's how you sort of got into mountain biking.
Yeah.
You were like cool older people.
Well, little did you know, I had no friends. And I was like, these are my first friends that I've ever had since I've lived in the US. And, but hey, it all worked out.
All worked out. Could have fooled me.
Yeah.
Back to you though. Yeah. I mean, I think, I almost said ultimate's been in your life. Mountain biking has been in your life for a long time. I'm wondering, how you see that continuing into the future. Like, how do you envision yourself with mountain biking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's
5
a
years,
great
10
question.
years from now.
Yeah, I mean, so like my first job ever that I ever had was at a bike shop. It was not a mountain bike shop. It was a road bike shop, which was, what was around Bethesda, Maryland, like DC area, Maryland. A lot of people with money and fancy road bikes. But actually there was a BMXer that I thought was the coolest guy there. It was this older guy that I was like, you're cool. And he always would tell me to get a BMX bike, but he was so good at it. He would warm up by doing a 360 off a 10 stair around the corner. He'd go ride every night, and I'd sometimes like go putz around with him on my hardtail mountain bike. But I was like, I'm never going to be as good as you. I can't get a BMX bike, which at this point I'm bummed I didn't. But because now I'll never ever be a BMXer. I've tried. Yeah, and then like that continued. Basically, I've worked at bike shops my entire working life. In college at Road 34. And then actually, once I graduated college, I was still working at 34 and trying to get a job outside of a bike shop, and it's like struggling pretty bad to make that happen. And so, finally decided I just need a break from Fort Collins. I'd been there for 6 years. And moving away, I'm passionate about bikes. I want to move somewhere where there is biking, but I'm done working in the bike industry. I'm done working at bike shops. And I pulled that off. I went on a road trip. I checked out Hood River. I checked out Bellingham. I came through, met some people that took me up to Whistler. And I ended up breaking my ankle last day at Whistler and was able to leave my vehicle with all my stuff. I'd moved out of the house in Fort Collins, left my vehicle in Bellingham at a friend's house, flew to our parents' house, and they became my roommates while I got surgery and started looking for a job. And I found a job outside the bike industry. social services, basically like a little nonprofit, and it was cool. It was great. It was me, and then with my big dreads that actually you made back when I was 14. You made those you created the dreads. So it was me, and then like probably 20 women, most of whom were over 45, like 50 to 60 age range. So that was great because they would always bring baked goods, and I loved it. They're all sweethearts. But that ended. I had started volunteer coaching for this mountain bike team, this local kids mountain bike team. Back then, there were not as many, even in Bellingham, there was very few opportunities for kids to, like get into mountain biking in an organized way. I think typically on any given group ride, there was usually more volunteer riders. There was probably like 3 or 4 volunteer riders and 2 or 3 kids with us. So things have changed a lot since then. That was 2014. And then the team manager's boyfriend was heading up Fanatic's internet department and was like, hey, we need help wrenching. So I started wrenching part-time while I was looking for another job, and actually got a job at Peace Health, our local hospital. And I was 1 week out from starting training. I said I'd accepted it, and I was a week away from starting training. And then Jaden at Fanatic said, hey, we need someone to, manage social media, write some blog posts, which I had done 1 or 2 just for fun while I was there, just to flex my writing skills. And it paid better, and it wasn't a crap job with weird hours at the hospital. So I said yes, because it was something else other than wrenching on bikes or selling bikes, at least directly. And here I am 7 years later. So that doesn't answer your question though. That's like career or, related. As far as mountain biking specifically, it's something I'm still, passionate about. I think that has ebbed a little bit from 3 years ago. I think the pandemic has played a role in that. Like I kind of cooled my jets a little when the pandemic started. I was like not trying to get hurt. And just, for a variety of reasons, I'm like not pushing as hard as I was. But I'm pushing in different ways. Like I got a cool trip coming up with Eric Olson. I'm actually hoping to talk to him next on this podcast about that trip. So I won't give away too much about that. I'm actually going to this year's formation with Hannah to help her dig. I expect, actually I hope next year they'll say there'll be enough women who know their way around a shovel. There may already be, but Hannah doesn't know who they are yet. But next year, I imagine full well that she'll be like, oh yeah, I got my pick of the litter for really talented female diggers that know exactly what to do out here and how to help me push the limits. So I'm really excited for that opportunity to go help Hannah and go be a part of formation. And as far as like, mountain biking in general, I don't think it's something I'll ever stop doing. It's a cathartic activity. It's, you can go lose yourself if you just want to go by yourself and just go zone out for a while and just spin, and just cruise and try and, as much as I hate the phrase, like try and get into that flow state, which I'm like cringing just saying that, but it exists. Or you can go with your friends and just have a blast with your friends out in the woods, which I think is why the sport continues to grow and why people continue to fall in love with it. And I'm happy that you get to experience it too. And, in whatever way you're able to do it, that you get enjoyment out of it. The odd ride every week or two that you and I get out together, I think that's been a really cool thing for me. So I'm pretty grateful for it. Yeah.
Me too. I with Ultimate, I'll have dreams where I'm like laying out in the air, which is like jumping horizontally to catch the disc.
Mm-hmm.
But in my dreams, it's happening in slow motion. And since I've started mountain biking, every once in a while now, I have a dream where I'm like riding down something super steep and I'm going in slow motion, and it's kind of cool. I mean, it's it's a rush and it's super enjoyable. So I appreciate that you forced me to try this sport.
Well, cheers. I'll cheers to that. And we'll take the last teeny sips of our wine. And I think on that note, now that I'm also done with my water, my voice is going to continue to go to shit. So
Let's not torture the listeners anymore.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, y'all. And maybe stay tuned for next time if you enjoyed this at all. I'm going to try and get Eric Olson in here before his big, cool trip that I suspect you'll probably want to hear about because it's totally batshit crazy. Gav, can you do you back me up on that statement?
I concur. It sounds gnarly.
Yeah. So we'll talk to him. Anyways, thanks, y'all. We'll talk to you next time. Yo!